No one can stop us now.
And welcome to Dark Natter, the podcast where we pod, proke, and I said proke. Oh, it was going so well, that, wasn't it? That was 7 seconds.
Do you know what the annoying thing as well is? I was actually going to interrupt you with the laugh, but I thought, oh no, he spent time writing that intro. I couldn't do that to you.
Shall I have another go?
Then you balls it up.
Go on, I'll try it again.
Go on then.
I can't summon up the enthusiasm for the creepy voice now. Let me get sight up. Come on, think about the episode that awaits us.
1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dark. You son of a. We prod and poke and inspect the inner workings of your favourite works of dark fiction. That's what I meant to say. Thank you. Well, that's good. Right, that's it. It took us a few takes, but we got there. Okay, well, everyone knows the drill by now. Every episode, one of us will pitch to the other a work, a concept from the world of dark fiction.
Pitch to other.
So, but northern speech is about efficient use of syllables.
Yeah, no, I like it.
Minimal. You know, why say, I'm going to pitch to you, when you could say, I'm going to pitch to.
And I suppose West Country is just like, you know, saying,
me.
All right, mate.
Me. Say baddie.
Baddie.
That should be, that's like your catchphrase, isn't it?
I'm putting it on a bit now, though. It's getting longer and longer. Right, baddie.
Lots of baddies to talk about today, of course.
Yeah.
Well, I'll finish explaining the concept and then we'll get stuck in. So, it's your turn to pitch today, and you're going to offer up a work for my consideration and potential entry into the Hall of Pain.
When do I have to laugh?
It's becoming quite frequent, isn't it?
Is,
I think every 5 minutes you have to do it.
Okay.
We'll have a little buzzer, and when it sounds, you just have to
do that stupid laugh.
Do that shit laugh.
It's really, yeah.
Okay, for next time, you have to come up with a new laugh, and I have to come up with a new Hall of Pain voice.
Okay.
But we won't tell each other, we'll just spring them on the day, and much mirth will ensue.
You'll probably balls it up anyway.
Hey? What are you pitching then?
So, the Hall of Pain, so far, I think we've got a 100% record. Everybody we've pitched and everything we've pitched is made it into the Hall of Pain. So this week, I don't know, I'm going to pitch a PlayStation 4 exclusive called Bloodborne.
It's in. Episode over. Done. It's a melter.
If this doesn't get it,
I love it.
I'm quitting this shit anyway. Because
no, I should. We'll put it through the usual interrogation, the ringer, the real deep dive analysis. But spoiler alert. Well, an actual spoiler alert that we will be going into the plot of Bloodborne. So if you have not played that video game and would like not to have the plot wrecked for you, then please naff off.
To be honest, I barely understand it myself.
Exactly, yeah, you're right. It's a bit unspoilable, isn't it? It's
it is, yeah.
But then
it's great.
A spoiler for this episode is that we both absolutely love Bloodborne because it's brilliant.
Maybe we should get an independent adjudicator to decide what goes in to the Hall of Pain, because I think we just love everything.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
So maybe in the future we should talk about stuff we think is really shit.
But then how could you summon up the enthusiasm?
We've stumbled upon like a real key flaw in the show's concept, haven't we?
But you know what? I like it.
Me too.
Exactly. Let's just do it.
So Bloodborne. What is it?
It's an action RPG released in 2015 and developed by From Software.
Of Dark Souls fame.
Yeah. I mean, they've been around for years, and Demon Souls kind of came before Dark Souls, but I would argue that Dark Souls kind of put them on the map, really. Maybe Demon Souls, I don't know, but Dark Souls, I think, is the game you associate with From Software, and it was a game that I played and absolutely loved. It was a game changer for me. I spent about a year playing it just off and on, and I loved it.
You loved it so much that you bought me a copy of it as a gift, which was a really nice thing to do.
How are you getting on with that?
And I made it about 20 minutes in and got killed multiple times and gave up because I thought it was too hard and it was stupid. And what a fool I was, because once you get past the, frankly, painful difficulty, it's not a curve, it's a cliff, difficulty cliff, chasm. There's no difficulty settings, no easy mode. It's just a rock-hard game. But once you
it's fair, though.
Well, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? Is that, this idea of fairness versus ease.
Like, yeah, you could say some games are cheap. There's kind of just like a wall you can't get through. But Dark Souls, I think, is just about being disciplined and patient sometimes.
Interesting.
And learning.
And it's, I mean, what is certainly true is the influence, the far-reaching tendrils of the Dark Souls sort of concept. Not just the rock-hard difficulty, but the melancholy sort of medieval fantasy setting.
Yeah.
The ambiguous plot that's not really... There's minimal exposition in the games.
Yeah.
It's more about environmental storytelling, like, oh, look, a crumbling ruined castle with a angry... bizarre monster in it.
Yeah.
I wonder what his deal is.
Yeah.
And you sort of find it out through scraps of paper and little bits of item descriptions.
Yeah.
It's a very clever, brilliant way of telling stories.
It really
it's unique to video games.
Yeah.
The Dark Souls series has been so successful. There's 3 of the main games of Dark Souls, and 2 and 3.
And Demon Souls.
Was the sort of precursor on the PS3.
Yes, yeah.
But yes, there's obviously now a slew of clones. You've got things, everything from, what's that really shit one?
There's quite a few.
I feel like there's a specific one.
There's one, Lords of the Fallen.
That's it. That's what I meant. Yeah, that's meant to be crap. I've never played it, to be fair.
Yeah, I think the thing with that one is they kind of... I remember reading the pitch was kind of like, well, it's Dark Souls, but it's got a story. And it's like, well, yeah, but so is Dark Souls, but you just got to work at it. It was just kind of, I don't know. It's missing the point a little bit. I mean, I get why they did it. And actually, I enjoyed it to an extent, but there came a point when it's just like, nah, this isn't fun anymore. Initially, I didn't mind it, but...
Whereas a game that, the opposite end of that spectrum, again, in my opinion, that I think was clearly heavily inspired by Dark Souls, but a fantastic game was Hollow Knight.
Yeah.
My God, that was good. I enjoyed that very, very much. But we're not here to talk about Dark Souls and its spin-offs. The reason for giving you that bit of context is because Bloodborne, today's topic, is very much I guess you would call it a spin-off, wouldn't you? It is a completely standalone game, not connected to the Dark Souls universe, but very similar in terms of gameplay and mechanics?
Yeah, I mean, there are some crucial differences. But I think the thing with the Dark Souls, any From Software game, Sekiro included, I don't like to really read anything about it beforehand. I don't like to watch any of the trailers, apart from maybe like the initial announcement trailer. I don't like to see any of the gameplay. I don't like to see the bosses, which is kind of hard in my job because I actually write about video games for a living. So,
did I forget to introduce who we are?
I think you did
at the beginning.
Yeah, you did.
Should we just go back and graft that in?
Yeah. Should we start again?
Just do all this again. You review video games for a living.
Yeah.
Because you're Liam Martin, the video games reviewer.
That's right.
And dark fiction enthusiast.
And you are John Richter,
the video games player
and one hell of an author.
Hey, that's quite sweet.
Of dark fiction.
Hence our shared interest in this medium.
So there you go. We don't have to start again, though, do we?
I'll cut and paste it together.
Yeah.
It'll be really slick when this comes out the other side. Don't you worry.
What were we talking about?
Can't remember. Well, I think your point was that there are some key differences between Bloodborne and its precursors, the Dark Souls games. But essentially, what you've got is the same...
that was my point, yeah.
You've got regenerating enemies. So when you slay a creature, an enemy, a standard run-of-the-mill enemy, they will reappear when your character resets themselves. In Dark Souls, it's a bonfire. In Bloodborne, it's a lantern, which is more thematically relevant, as we'll come on to.
In Dark Souls, you collect souls. In Bloodborne, you collect blood. And that's the currency you use to level your character up. You lose any blood you accrued when you die, but you can get it back if you get back to the place where you died. In fact, actually, in Bloodborne, sometimes an enemy actually has it. If you remember, their eyes are
they can pick up your lost blood.
Yeah.
But essentially, the balance that's trying to strike is one between progress in the game, because if you reset yourself, you bank your blood that you've gathered in order to increase your stats and your capabilities. The penalty is all the baddies reappear and you're pretty much back to square one.
Yeah.
Whereas if you press on to actually try and conquer more of the game and reveal more and progress towards the ending, you run the risk of dying and losing everything you've gained up to that point. Yeah. And let me tell you, that is not a good feeling.
No, it's not. Oh, God, it's not, no. But I guess the point I was trying to make before we forgot that we hadn't introduced ourselves was that in Bloodborne... before I actually played it, I was aware, because again, I didn't like to read too much about it, but I was aware that in this one you had a gun and the combat was much faster and there was more emphasis on attack as opposed to Dark Souls. It's very much sword and shield. You're always defending yourself. So I actually thought it was going to be a different game. I thought it was going to feel much different. I was almost expecting more of a Devil May Cry style game where you're doing sort of big combos, and because Devil May Cry you have a sword and guns, but actually it does still feel very much like a Dark Souls game, albeit you are much more aggressive. You don't use your shields. You actually, when you take damage, you can actually get some of it back by attacking the enemy kind of quickly after you've taken damage. Just that risk versus reward.
And also, this is again an excellent example of where the gameplay fits with the plot, the story, and the world. So your character in this, essentially, it's a gothic fantasy. It's a kind of a Victorian feel to it. The fictional setting is a city called Yharnam, which feels a lot like kind of old London Jack the Ripper territory. There's sort of twisted Westminster-esque buildings in the background, and your character is a nameless hunter.
Yes.
And so this idea that they're out on a hunt, bloodthirsty, slaying the beasts that are stalking the streets, you are rewarded and actively encouraged to attack, rather than Dark Souls' very patient defend, counter-attack combat. So it's kind of very similar but very different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I played this, was lucky enough to play this before it came out, and I was really surprised by the differences and the similarities, I suppose. It was different to what I was expecting, but I was really pleased with that, because it felt like a Dark Souls game, which to me is great.
And what's interesting about our experience of this game is, while you love Dark Souls, and therefore this was another Dark Souls-esque game, belting your happy, I didn't get it, didn't understand the Dark Souls thing, wrote it off, was like, I'm far too busy and important to waste my time playing a stupidly hard game, dying over and over again. I've got important projects to do, like writing weird books or whatever it is that I do, trying to grow a beard.
or playing other video games.
Playing easier video games. But I think you might have showed me the beginning of Bloodborne, and I think seeing somebody play it who knew what they were doing, and also just the theme and the sort of setting was a bit more I like a dark medieval fantasy, but I even more like a gothic Victorian werewolf hunting creep show. So I thought, okay, I'm having this. I'll give this a go. So I bought Bloodborne, played through it, struggled through it. Let's be honest, because I found it incredibly difficult, but loved it, and that has motivated me to. I haven't yet done this, but I have recently bought the Dark Souls trilogy, so I'm going to play through those games if it kills me.
And I think it's one of those things where, kind of the same with me in Final Fantasy, the first one you play, it will always kind of be your favourite, and it kind of inspires you to check out the other ones. Now, where it differs slightly is that Dark Souls was the first one I played, and I didn't think anything would top it. But you asked me at the end if I think Bloodborne is better than Dark Souls, and my answer may surprise you.
Interesting.
Mr. Richter.
And what we should try and probe is why you love Bloodborne so much. We've touched on it's ostensibly a gothic fantasy about a city. It's a fascinating setting, really. It's a city whose currency is blood, so that suggests a heavy kind of vampiric feel. But it isn't in any way really a vampire game. What it is instead is about people who infuse themselves with blood. They drink it, they use it for money, they inject it into themselves. They believe that it will cleanse them of impurity and make them stronger. And one of the reasons the townsfolk want to become stronger is because their town is beset by a plague of vile beasts that they must kill and defend their homes against. And the Hunters are in effect an elite group of, elected townsfolk or outsiders that are brought in to rid the streets of this monstrous plague. But of course, what's slowly revealed over the course of the game is that it's this very process of infusing themselves with blood to make themselves more powerful and better able to defeat the beasts that is turning them into beasts.
Yeah.
And it's almost this sort of purgatory, endless cycle, like the way the bad guys regenerate every time. It's like you're trapped in some sort of nightmare, which becomes very kind of resonant further on. But certainly this idea of transformation of humans into beasts, rather than the kind of Dracula vampire blood stuff, that we're more into kind of werewolf territory there.
Yeah,
so it feels like a bit of a mishmash of all the, I guess, Victorian horror tropes, which is cool.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, even the kind of Frankenstein style, trying to create life to a much lesser extent. You could even argue that with the experiments.
Absolutely. There's elements of that heavily,
as you say, the vampiric and the werewolf stuff. And actually, interestingly, I would say the first sort of quarter of the game, because when you start playing Bloodborne, I think in any of these From Software games, it's kind of for me anyway, it's kind of a slow process initially. You're exploring everything because you want to get every power-up available. You're kind of trying to level up so much that, the process is quite slow. And for the first maybe 20 hours or so, I actually was a little bit disappointed by some of the bosses because it was just variations of kind of big beasts.
I suppose we should touch there again, for the benefit of anyone who isn't a sort of Dark Souls aficionado, on the way those games deal with the boss fights, which is a huge component of the gameplay. So I'd say part one is this venture forth and balance progress with capitalising on your accrued whatever it is, blood, souls, in effect, it's sort of experience points. But that bollocks, eventually you will encounter, your progress will result in you hitting the usually very high, hard to scale, solid wall of a boss.
Yes.
And this is a real, in old school video game sense, this is a proper boss fight against a visually impressive, rock hard. It's almost like a puzzle in and of itself. How the hell am I going to beat this thing? And sometimes, particularly in Bloodborne, terrifying, horrid, really disturbing as well. And the prospect of fighting this thing fills you with sort of visceral dread.
So the first boss I didn't realise this at the time, it's actually optional, but the first boss I came across was the Cleric Beast, and again it's this big shrieking beast that's really fast but also really huge. And actually, I beat it on my first attempt. Just a little impressive.
It's pretty impressive, man. I'd say that in a sarcastic voice, but I am quite impressed.
Yeah, I was quite impressed. Well, I'm bragging about it now. So
I think my first encounter with it smashed me into the floor in about 3 seconds. So,
I don't think I beat any other boss first go. So actually, apart from Witches of Henwick.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to that as well. One of many, many, many optional bosses.
As is the Cleric Beast.
And I think again, not unique to Bloodborne, but I guess all of From Software's these games, the bosses are often a source. They're part of that kind of rich narrative, that ambiguous narrative tapestry, where the cleric beast appears. You know it's called the cleric beast because it says the cleric beast at the bottom of a big energy bar.
Yeah.
That's depressingly long. But it doesn't. You don't know what the cleric beast is at this point. You've no idea what it is. Just a great big screaming, grey, hairy, massive, clawed, terrifying monster. But the game invites you to some extent unearth information about this monster, which is available often later after you've killed it,
absolutely,
in the shape of item descriptions or
maybe a
notes.
short cutscene.
Correct.
Very
if you're lucky, you'll get a little cutscene. But and other times, it's never really explained what this creature is, why it's there, why it wants to kill you. But I love that. It's great.
And because in a lot of other video games, the bosses, while they look great and they're really fun to fight against, they don't really mean anything. They're just kind of thematically, that's kind of what you expect from the end of a fire level. You're going to fight some big fire-breathing monster. But in Bloodborne, as you say, and the Dark Souls games, you really want to find out what these things are all about, because it will feed into the lore of the game and this kind of story. You get more out of it by investigating. There's always a reason that these things are there, and usually it's some tragic...
it's all, I mean, we said beforehand we were going to give a shout out to, and apologies if this pronunciation is completely wrong, but there's a YouTube star called Vaatvidya, Vaatvidya. I don't know the significance of that name, and I've probably mispronounced it and mangled it, but he's put together a series of excellent, really, really good analysis videos of the Dark Souls games, the Bloodborne games. I'm desperately trying to avoid the Sekiro ones because I'm still slogging through that game at the moment. And as you say, the tragic backstory of all of these characters that you can sort of plough through these games and barely scratch the surface of these stories. You'll only really tease them out if you do a lot of reading of the in-game kind of literature and a lot of thinking and sort of filling in the gaps for yourself, which is brilliant.
Because I think with video games, there's always been this obsession, especially as the technology improved, that games become more cinematic, and they're basically interactive movies almost. And the From Software games are so great because they don't do that. They just build an amazing game world and fill it with lots of, really interesting and often horrible bosses and monsters. And they just get you to, with a few sentences here and there, get you to kind of figure out what it's all about.
Yeah, I love it.
And I prefer that.
I think it fits the medium. It explores a way in which video games can be different from movies instead of just becoming an interactive movie, incredibly linear, and it's virtually on rails.
And they're often crap. I mean,
correct.
Even the games that people say, it's a fantastic story, and it's like playing a movie. But actually, if you watch that as a movie, it would probably be a pretty shit movie. And so I think it's great that. The From Software do it like this. It's just much more interesting.
I love the ambiguous narrative. It's almost like you're sort of glimpsing what's happening through cracks in the wall and overheard snatches of dialogue, but you never really treated to the full story, even though you're a key player in it, because you're wandering through the world, killing off creatures. You feel like you're a tool of some higher intelligence, and you're being used, and it's a weird feeling as the player that
you've not finished Dark Souls now.
That is correct. Okay. I have not.
Well, just think about that when you play it.
I'll park that one for now and revisit it. Give me a few years, and I might actually get it done.
Just make sure you use your imagination as well, and also I think it creates a kind of community. And I like that. I think some games, when you go on, you don't want to get the spoilers, but with games like Dark Souls and Minecraft as well, I always find that there's a really good community there of people sharing their experiences and inspiring you to have those same experiences.
It is brilliant, and we perhaps should just touch there on some of the online elements of the game.
Yes, because that's another thing. Yeah,
very clever, innovative use of not just the PlayStation or modern video game consoles' online capabilities. Yes, there is a sort of a deathmatch mode, but it doesn't take the form of just pile in every man for themselves, kill each other. instead you're given, you collect an item quite late in the game that enables you to be, you can become available to be either summoned to assist a player, and I did, let me tell you, I did a lot of summoning to get through this game, and you can bring in these much more capable players than yourself to kind of
That's
knock in.
interesting, because I'm kind of the school of thought that that's kind of cheating. Don't get me wrong, I did summon people, but I always felt really bad.
Yeah, I did as well.
Felt guilty.
But whoever it was, if you're out there, I can't remember the name of any of the avatars that I summoned. Fiery Bell. Then thanks to you for your services. So there's that. What you can also do though, if you're more mischievous, is invade someone's game and attack them. So they're trying to progress through the game, they're playing through the level, killing monsters, and you can rock up and just undermine them and attack them. I did it once and got humiliatingly smashed by the person that I invaded, so I never did it again. What about you?
I didn't really do it, but I did enjoy it. Sometimes it was a bit of a pain in the arse. And in the Souls games, it's happened to me where I've been really underpowered and it's really annoyed me. But in Bloodborne, actually, I felt so confident that I didn't mind when people invaded my game, and I actually had some amazing battles with other players.
I had someone who invaded my game once, and we were talking earlier, weren't we, about It Follows, which we'll have to put on the list. In fact, did I put that on the list? Let's get that on the list. That's one for a future episode, because that is a belter. And obviously the antagonist of that movie is a very slowly walking, following, inexorable presence. So this person had gone with I think there's an item in the game, is it the lead? Or the blue elixir or whatever it is? I can't quite remember what it's called. And it makes you very resistant to damage, but you can only walk at an incredibly slow pace. And they'd obviously used this item, and their intention was to just walk slowly after me through the level. And they must have seen that movie, right? It was a brilliant idea. So I was just running, get away!
But it was always great though when somebody invaded you and you just battered them, because
never happened to me, mate. But it sounds good.
It was probably you probably invaded my game.
Was it you?
Yeah, it may have been.
Hang on a minute.
Don't get me wrong, I didn't win every time. I got battered many a time, but there was a few times, especially after on my third or fourth playthrough, that I could hold my own, and it was great.
And there was another element of the online play is this ability to leave notes for the players, which I think is a brilliant idea. Yeah. So you'll be walking through this world that feels already like a bizarre, dreamlike or nightmare-like quality to it, almost kind of David Lynch fantasy in a weird crossover kind of way. And then you would stumble upon these sort of ghostly after images. And you realise quickly that these are other players whose deaths you are witnessing, and you're seeing them fail, or, they just walked off a cliff and died, so I better not go off that cliff. But another feature is that other players can leave little recorded messages. Yeah. Now, this would be clearly open to abuse if it was free text. So the game doesn't just let you type anything, so you're not finding messages saying, your mum's fit and all that stuff, although that would be probably would be quite funny. It gives you a sort of a very limited vocabulary that you basically pre-select from a bank of words, but people still use it pretty amusingly, So you'll get little messages like you'll go into some creepy, sinister wooden shack and you'll see a message on the floor and you'll click on it and it'll say reeks of old man. And then round the corner there's some horrible old dude with a gun about to shoot it in your face. I thought that was a great aspect of the game.
And that's something that came from Demon Souls and Dark Souls. But it's just it's quite nice as well. Again, I was talking earlier about fostering that community, but just helping other players as well. And obviously, you can be a little bit mischievous with it, but also you can help each other out as well. Help your fellow player get through the game, and I think that's quite nice. And
surprising how many of the messages were genuinely truthful, helpful, instead of being mean-spirited, like, hey, walk off this cliff. There didn't seem to be a lot of that. I quite like that. Yeah. It felt like you were, again, part of this big online community of people who sort of wanted to help you discover all the game's secrets. Because I think you're
like me as well. You're not that bothered about online play.
No.
I like a single-player game.
Me too. stories.
But I like this aspect of it because it's not too.
It's what I don't think has been achieved yet in video games with the massive rise in popularity of online multiplayer gaming. So we're the same. We like dark fiction stories. So a story to me is kind of inherently a single player experience. You are playing through a story. Although we've just touched on maybe video games give us an opportunity to explore ways of telling stories that aren't a linear narrative. You've got this idea of kind of emergent narrative. You talked about Minecraft. So I do feel there would be a way to blend narrative storytelling with multiplayer online play that isn't just a cooperative 2 or 3 people playing through the story together. There's something still to emerge that is like a new type of storytelling. I feel like video games give us this opportunity. So I don't think Bloodborne's quite cracked that.
No.
But it felt like a new way to interact with a huge community of other players that wasn't just fight them or fight monsters together with them. The message thing was really cool, I thought.
Yeah, definitely.
So, we are about halfway through our usual attempted hour-long run time.
Yeah.
And I really do feel like we could talk about this game for hours and hours, so we'll try not to. And the reason I think this is good is because we've gone halfway without touching on a key development in Bloodborne's plot and themes, which exposes itself, or begins to expose itself, about halfway through the game, maybe a bit earlier. And
it felt like halfway through because, like I said earlier, it took me so long to play through it initially. Do you want to do the honors?
Well, I guess from my perspective, I am a massive fan of H.P. Lovecraft. The guy himself, a lot of controversy, and we will touch on that in another episode, because Lovecraft, I'm sure, merits a future Dark Natter discussion. So I'm not going to touch on him, his works, and the negative side of his personality. I'm certainly not going to touch on all his kind of wider legacy, except to say that it's massive. He's been an incredibly influential horror writer.
You say you're not going to do this, but you've been talking about him for 5 minutes now.
Well, the reason is because clearly the creators of Bloodborne had a similar view, and the game evolves into a kind of open love letter, really, to Lovecraft and all his works and his influence. And so I didn't know that was going to happen.
Me neither.
So I'm playing through this game thinking, A, I'm feeling really good because I'm actually managing to progress through a From Software game after my aforementioned abject failure at Dark Souls. B, I'm really enjoying it because it's great. And then suddenly to realise that it's becoming a Lovecraft game was an incredible, experience. So, and how does it manifest? How does Bloodborne transform from gothic werewolf hunting simulator to H.P. Lovecraft? So,
I think it happens when you get to the forest area, the Forbidden Woods. At first, it's the same as the sort of creepy wooded area. There's these enemies with snakes for heads, and it's pretty disgusting. But then you come across just a few these celestial emissaries,
the blue things,
blue little blobby things.
Yeah, they look like little X-Files aliens.
They really do, yeah. And once you get past them, you get to. And there's a boss battle, and you get to Bergenworth, the Bergenworth lecture building, and that is when it really transforms from, as you said, a kind of werewolf hunter game into just this really weird
cosmic horror.
Yeah.
And you start. You're absolutely right. Bergenworth College is in effect in some ways the source of all of this horrific, mutated, monstrous, beastly curse. Because they've been openly experimenting with, in effect, to try to communicate with great ones.
Yeah.
So,
which is obviously, like I said, just a nod to Lovecraft there.
Correct.
It's not even subtle.
Correct. Yeah. Open love letter, which is brilliant. So, I'll again, Vat Vidya's YouTube offerings are the brilliant, sort of very logical telling of the Bloodborne story. I will attempt to summarise here. In effect, there is a labyrinth beneath the city, which houses the remnants of a prior civilization, the Thumerians, and this labyrinth contains the remnants of a great one, or some great ones, and it gives access to the city and its scientists to this elder, in effect, kind of elder god's blood.
Yeah.
And they start to experiment with that, use it in the transfusion process that the city is so enamoured with. They believe they're going to obtain not just the powers of the great ones, but insight into the true nature of things and the true nature of being. And insight is, in fact, a stat, isn't it, that your character can accrue. And brilliantly, as your insight increases, you start to see things that you couldn't see before.
Because actually, if you get, I think it's 40 insight, you actually see one of the Amygdala beasts on the side of the cathedral.
It's brilliant.
Which you can get that fairly early on. So before you even get to the Forbidden Woods in Bergenworth, you can see this huge, great big, just disgusting, almost spidery monster
clinging to the
side, and it's just there. It's not doing anything to you, but it's
invisible.
there, and I really annoyingly had that spoiled for me as well, which is a shame. But yeah, it's just incredible. That's just one of many kind of just little hidden Easter eggs. You start to hear babies crying and all sorts of
very
stuff,
disturbing. There's
which ties into something that happens later. And
there are these enemies that you encounter relatively early on in the game in the cathedral ward, who are these sort of masked, pretty big, lumbering sort of enforcer types. Some of them have big, stout canes that they're kind of clobbering you with, and some of them have these lanterns. And again, I think if your insight is over a certain level, the lanterns are covered with eyeballs on the outside, which is really weird. And links to another thing that's a real big theme in the game, is this obsession with insight and knowledge and eyes. And from this point onwards, we start to get eyeballs growing out of the walls. We start to get lots and lots of reference to the Bergenworth College scholars attempting to line their brains with eyes. Which is just a great little phrase. And the game takes a real swerve at this point towards this sort of real sinister. It's this idea of people trying to transcend their humanity and their mortal sort of vessels, but in doing so, they're seemingly prepared to take on really grotesque forms. And that's kind of the source of the horror, I think. If that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And this is also, I think, from a gameplay point of view, when the enemies start to change, and it's not just about fighting, werewolves anymore. You're fighting these kind of great old ones, or people that are obsessed with the great old ones, like Mikolash and like Ron the vacuous spider. It's just really bizarre stuff. And
some really weird. So, like you touched on, like Ron the vacuous spider is I think, again, it's all very ambiguous and not really fully explained, but it appears to be someone who has been used as the subject of an experiment, the result of which has been to create at least a partial godlike being, but the god is an idiot god. It's a stupid, mindless sort of big. It's not really even spider-like. It's more like a big caterpillar. But it births spiders from its body that attack you as its defense mechanism. But it doesn't behave in any sort of enlightened way. It just sort of rolls about like a screeching, like a child. It's hence its name, Ron the vacuous spider. It's a god, but it's also a moron. So the idea that used to be a person, it's not a humanoid creature.
No,
it's not a person with some sort of Resident Evil style weird growths. It's become this person has completely been replaced by this other being, a bit like these little blue celestial emissaries.
And you see some of those. There's another, again, Bloodborne is just full of optional areas and secrets, and you can actually go at the beginning of the game. You start off in this like on this hospital bed in this clinic, and you can go back there. You can actually access the inside of this clinic, and it's completely optional, but you find that there's an imposter there, and they've been doing these experiments, and they've been birthing these just weird little celestial emissaries, and the person who actually ran the clinic before is one of these things now. Am I right?
Yeah, totally right. Yeah, she's, in other words, the good-natured nurse who nurses you back to health is at some point quite early on in the game replaced by one of the these kind of sinister science / there's a lot of kind of we haven't really touched on the sort of church clergy angle, where there's in effect these kind of warring factions that have different beliefs about how this blood should be pursued or not touched or feared. Fear the old blood. And we won't go into too much detail because the plot does get pretty arcane when you start to delve into the differences. But Yosefka's clinic, a whole massive optional section of the game that I completely missed when I played through it.
And also you can send people there for, so say safe haven. And if you do send them there, you can send them one of two places, or you can just, not encounter them at all. If you do send them there, there's actually more of these little celestial beings,
which makes you feel a bit
roaming
guilty.
around, which makes you feel really bad.
They've been and there's one of them. The proof, I guess, that this is definitely the game's intention, that these people you sent there have been converted into these strange, sort of gelatinous blue waddling blobs, which are just so feeble as to see, why on earth would anyone want to create those? It's this misguided attempt to commune with the Great Ones. There's one of them lying on the hospital bed that still has a human hand, that's really disturbing, isn't it? That is some dark.
But again, with this optional content, you can also send them to the cathedral where there's this really kind of charitable thing.
Charitable little hunched figure.
But you can also send this another person that you encounter there, and it completely changes what happens to those.
Oh, the guy that kills them all.
The beggar,
it's brilliant. It's like, there's so many permutations of that little equation.
That's right.
Which characters do you encounter, and do you direct them to go to the cathedral as a safe haven, or do you direct them to go to Yosefka's clinic? And if you send the wrong person to the cathedral, he then sets about slowly killing off all the others. Brilliant.
And also, another one as well, when one of the what's her name? Maria? Is it? No, not Maria. It's
Ariana?
That's the one. When you send her there and you speak to her, if you've sent... it's not a nun.
Oh, I can't remember her name, but she kills her, doesn't she?
But and when you speak to Ariana, if you actually turn the camera, you can see in the distance the other one really glaring at you. And it's just little touches like that.
Because they haven't... It's not like... I guess I think of video games as this... Well, because it is. It's a massive, profit-generating machine. Every decision you expect is driven by... corporate, the standard capitalist incentives of profit, revenue. But Bloodborne feels like there's been so much investment of time and effort and artistry for no real commercial gain whatsoever. There's no need for them to put that little bit in.
No.
But they did anyway because it's brilliant. So good on them.
It's kind of like the art, in this case, has come first over...
That's definitely what it feels like. And again, H.P. Lovecraft, not to everyone's taste, and we will touch on the negatives, the big negative side of Lovecraft in another episode, but certainly in terms of his artistic work, I think this is the best example of Lovecraftian fiction, other than his own stuff, that I've ever encountered. I think it's
hard to argue with that,
So,
what's your favourite boss?
Favourite boss in Bloodborne?
Yeah.
So, it's a toss-up, right? I opened this episode with we put a quote from Mikolash, he's great because he's not a great big celestial, otherworldly monster. He's just a daft bloke with a funny hat.
Who runs around
cackling all day.
But actually, a lot of people don't like that boss, but I really like it as well, just purely for the same reason. It's quite different. And just the lore, I guess, that you some of the things he says, when you kind of piece them together and think about it, just, what it kind of points to. I quite like that boss as well. But I think my favourite would be Ludwig.
Oh, yeah, Belter.
And again, it's
Absolute
probably
Belter.
not technically the best boss battle, I think you could give that to maybe even Maria.
The Astral Clock Tower. It's great, that.
But I just think visually, the music is the best.
I agree with that. It's my favourite one.
Shanty almost.
Sinister sea shanty. But the thing with Ludwig is, right, this is another example of the kind of the way the game tells its stories. We've heard about this guy, the first hunter, and we're all expecting this noble a fallen knight, a really famed, beloved figure in the city who was slaying beasts left, right and centre. We've read, I think, somewhere that he became, ultimately, as everyone is cursed to do, who imbibes too much blood, becomes a beast themselves. But in your head, you're still left with this idea that he's going to be a big bloke in a suit of armour. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, so you've heard about Ludwig. He doesn't appear in the main game, so that's it. Okay, whatever.
But you've still heard,
And then you get the DLC, and then you go into this sort of blood-drenched sewer bit of wherever you are, and there's these kind of cursed. They're basically living corpses that are just entrenched in the blood, and they're kind of pouring at you as you walk past. And then one of them says something like, "Oh, a terrible monster approaches. It's Ludwig," and you think, "Whoa, what? I don't. Is this going to be this noble guy who I've read? Oh, great! I can't wait to meet him."
Yeah, it's like, finally, I get to see this.
And
Ludwig.
Then the thing that emerges
is just
it looks like let's try and describe it. I'm going to say it looks like an inside-out horse with an extra head grafted on and eyeballs inside its mouth where its teeth should be.
Did you ever read the Beano, the Bastard Kid?
I didn't expect you to say that. Yes, I did.
It looks like a horse version of Plug.
It looks like Plug from the Bastard Kids, crossed with a horse. That's been put through Jeff Goldblum's fly machine,
maybe,
with another horse, and then just kicked around a car park for 3 days by Colchester United.
But the best thing about that boss battle as well is about halfway through, you get a little mini cutscene where he gets his sword, which is actually a bit of a nod to the Souls games as well. And you kind of see his humanity come back a little bit again, and it's
up to that point he's been a shrieking monstrous, disgusting abomination, and then suddenly it stood on its hind legs talking to you in English.
Like, there you are, like you were by my side all along, or something like that about his sword.
And the music swells up at that point to a big crescendo for
I'm
the
getting
second.
goosebumps thinking about it. It's so good. Again,
show.
Maybe not technically the best boss fight, but it's my favourite.
I'll give you that. Yeah. That's a great pick. So, we've talked about the Lovecraftian story. The ending is... There are a couple of different ones.
3.
The true ending, or the sort of best ending, in inverted commas, is if you find 3 out of 4 incredibly rare items, which are the umbilical cords.
Yeah.
I think I'm right saying there are 4 that you can get.
Yeah.
But you only have to get 3 of them to get the ending, if I've got my facts right. And in that ending, let's go through them. So, the Hunter's Dream has been established as the kind of hub location where you return to, if you so wish, when you get to one of the lanterns and you wish to kind of level up your character and
living
buy stuff. And there's this beautiful, nice lass who is some sort of living, sort of like a living wooden human-sized doll.
And if you go, before you get your first insight, if you visit the Hunter's Dream, she's still a doll.
Yeah, just a doll.
She reacts to some of your gestures, though.
Yeah,
which I didn't know the first time. But she's still a doll.
Brilliant.
Created by...
Gaiman.
Yes.
So the only other characters there, you've got this bizarre living doll who seems to be there to simply cater for your every need. And then you've got this daft old bloke in a wheelchair who's about 100 years, looks about... He's ancient.
Yeah.
And he's a bit sort of doddering old cockney, isn't he? He's like, I'm, what's my name again? Oh, yeah, German. Yeah, I was an hunter back. Just get out there and slay a few beasts. Yeah. Don't worry about the plot of this guy's all bollocks anyway. That's basically his deal. And then sometimes you go back and he's not there.
Yeah.
And sometimes you go back and he's there, he's having a kip. And he's just this sort of benign, slightly pointless old fart.
Yeah.
But towards the end of the game, when the true nature of the world has been revealed, you go back to the Hunter's Dream, and Gehrman has assumed his former position of power, and he's suddenly an upright. He's no longer confined to his wheelchair. He's there to do what must be his duty, which is to perpetuate this endless cycle of hunters to sustain the nightmare, in effect. And he gives you the option. You can either sacrifice yourself and let him chop your head off, and he just does chop your head off. And that was the option I picked, because I didn't fancy fighting him, so I was quite relieved.
Yeah, and then what happens then?
And then
I think you wake up, don't
you? You awaken, as if from a dream.
Yeah.
So you've been relieved from the nightmare, even though it itself continues. Yeah. Or you can refuse, and then you must fight Gehrman, who is, as you might expect, solid.
Really, yeah.
What happens if... I've never done that. What happens if you do that?
If you do that, I think then you kind of just take his position.
Yeah, you become the new sort. It's a bit like Streets of Rage bad ending. You become the boss. You became the boss.
Yeah.
But if you collect all the umbilical cords, you instead transcend, and you not only do you defeat Gehrman, you have to defeat a great one that emerges from the moon, which is of course another massively constant theme throughout the game. The moon growing bigger and bigger as the game progresses, and the darkness descends. So a great one, the blood moon. So the great one, the moon presence, is sort of coughed up, and you have to kill that as well. And then the next thing you know, the doll is picking up this gelatinous slug, about 2 foot long,
like a slug, isn't it?
Blue effort off the floor, and she's like, Hunter, well done, and congratulating you almost on this great achievement of transcending your physical body. It's dead weird, isn't it? That's a weird ending. Invites even more questions than the rest of the game.
Really does, yeah. I've done all 3.
Maybe there's a sequel to come where you play as the slug.
Maybe. I think that, in theory. And there's so many theories as well about who the doll is, the moon presence.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the DLC, the downloadable bonus content. There's only one of it. And that explores another Great One's origin story, doesn't it? So you play through some really, really horrific locations. The research hall with the straitjacketed people whose heads have been, in effect, injected with fluid so that they become these kind of swollen blobs. That really, I find that quite disturbing. You have those kind of endless spiral staircases. I just wanted to get out of there.
And there's another optional bit there as well, where you can keep revisiting one of the blobs, and they talk about Lady
fluid.
Maria and the brain fluid. Yeah.
Horrible.
Just great stuff.
And then ultimately you ascend the research hall.
And then you fight the living failures,
which are almost like this blue celestial emissaries that went wrong.
Yeah. So you assumed basically they're the things they experimented on that just didn't work out.
And the Living Failures music is great again.
It's really good.
The soundtrack to the DLC is it's absolutely
better
brilliant.
than the main soundtrack.
I do too. Yeah. And so your reward for wading through all of that lot is you ascend into the Astral Clock Tower and you fight Lady Maria, who was once Gehrman's pupil? Yes. Or Mrs. or both?
I think there's...
something going on there.
There's, it kind of insinuates that Gehrman was a bit of a pervert, actually.
Yeah.
Because actually, I think there's a book in his study that you can see, and it's something like how to pick up maidens or something.
Is that true? I didn't know that. Well, she's a good-looking lass for a weird sort of a dead body that comes to life and fights you, but you slay Maria in what a lot of people say that's the best fight in the game. People love that Maria battle.
It is very
it's
good.
It's just a brilliant sort of sword play. Purists.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then you find that the clock strikes whatever it strikes, and you emerge through the clock to find that everything you've just been through was beneath the water.
Yes.
And you emerge onto the top of it's a sort of a scattering of very small islands that you can walk across to make your way to the shore of a huge sea. And you enter a fishing hamlet, which is again another massively Lovecraftian, Innsmouth.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And that is one of the best bits of the game. I love that.
Yeah.
And
that, I think actually the DLC was supposed to be split into 2 parts, and that was part 2.
Got it.
But they ended up, from what I understand, just releasing it all as one,
condensed
which I'm kind of glad they did.
Yeah, it's great. It's so good. When I realised it was a fishing village, I was like, perfect. What better way to end this game than there? And you again, all manner of like barnacled horrors await you in that shithole.
There's that bit where one of those things just drops down from the sky. Did you remember?
I do, and someone, and again, it didn't occur to me. They pointed out that that's because at that point you are in effect beneath the surface of the lake or the ocean, and it's somehow fallen out of its world and got through into this nightmare beneath. And then this section of the game funnels you towards a beach, and you find all these weird half human, half snail
just
creatures
kind of like
bowing,
and
you can kill them and they're not bothered. They just don't do anything.
They don't do anything.
You feel a bit bad. They're all just bowing down. And
but you do it anyway.
Did a few.
I did it a few. Well, actually, out of
sympathy,
rage.
We were mercy killings. Well, okay. We're not horrible.
Well, I'm thinking more because you end up fighting what is essentially the final boss of the game.
And it emerges from the corpse of a great one that has washed up on the shore. And so all the narrative, again, the ambiguous narrative, but it's suggested that the sort of the Bergenworth scholars descended on this town and just pillaged it to get this blood from this corpse, and just ransacked the place and killed all the occupants, and the horrible shit went down. So you get there to the site of this great crime, and a newborn baby crawls out of it, a sort of humanoid, dragging the placenta behind it, which it then uses as its main weapon in the fight.
And it is disgusting. A tough fight.
I've never killed it. I gave up. Didn't do it.
I did. First time. No, I didn't. It wasn't. I did do it, but
well done.
That is just, you just got to memorise its attacks, and just got to, you've just got to chip away slowly. You've just got to be patient. But it's a really good, that's the thing I like about these games, though. It's so satisfying when you do it. I remember sending you a screenshot of when I think I got it down to literally, it must have been like 0.05% of its health, and I died.
Oh,
but I did do it eventually.
I feel your pain, man. And you almost feel guilty killing that thing, because it's a disgusting, horrible monster that's trying to kill you. So you're doing it in events, but it's a baby, isn't it?
And it's called the Orphan of Cos.
It's screaming while it's attacking you, like can't communicate its anger. It's almost like it's fearful. So it's attacking you because it doesn't understand what it is or what's going on. But you killed it anyway.
Or some say cousin. But it's a really good DLC, and it really genuinely adds a lot to the.
It's brilliant, and a real fitting conclusion on that beach with that battle. One other quick touch point is another huge optional section game is the Chalice Dungeons, and although we've enthused about Bloodborne because it's ace, they're a bit shit, aren't they?
They are a bit shit. So they're optional. I did them purely to get the trophies to platinum.
Yes.
And
because you had to, in other words. You had no choice.
Well, I put so much time into that game. It's one of the few games in recent years, especially, that I've gone back and completed over and over. And it's the only game I think I've ever bothered trying to get all the trophies for. I've never normally been that bothered, but it kind of just felt like it deserved it.
That's fair enough.
So I did do the kind of main Chalice dungeons.
But in effect, you are exploring the aforementioned Thumerian labyrinth.
Yeah.
And it's a sort of procedurally generated, everyone's different. It sounds really cool.
There are some good, lore bits and stuff to discover, but they're not great. And there's one as well where you only have, like either, 25% health, something like that, and you've got to fight an amygdala, a basically one hit kill, and I must have done that about I'd say probably 60, 70 times.
Oh, God.
Maybe
Before
not
you
that
finally
much,
cracked
but I did. Oh, God.
Jeez.
And it wasn't even, you get satisfying when you've done it. I was just angry.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, is that the dungeons seem to... So they're very repetitive.
Yeah.
So yes, there's thousands and thousands of different combinations, they all look the same. There's not much to find that makes you feel justified in bothering to go down there. All you seem to get is more materials to unlock more dungeons, which look the same again.
There's like I said, there's a couple of story bits. You the Queen of
the Yharnam Queen,
which is cool, but no, I think they could have done without it. I think it's definitely the weak link of the game, but it's optional.
Correct, you don't have to do it.
So you don't have to do it. And even if you, like me, wanted to get all the trophies, you can kind of, there's, I think, 7 or 8 that you kind of have to do.
It's a very strange thing that is a whole other, discussion that we won't do in detail on this show, but so we're basically saying that bit of the game was not fun, not enjoyable, and yet you were motivated to play through it. Because
I felt like I kind of owed it to the game.
Isn't that a strange thing? Because the rest of the game was so good. But,
so, yeah.
Oh, because you're insane.
I was after that.
Hey, you could do that laugh now. Yeah.
Needs work.
It still needs work. Okay, I think we have covered Bloodborne in some depth there, but still equally feel like we've barely scratched the surface of what is such a deep, rich, blood-soaked experience. Tentacle-writhing, horrible mess. And now I have to decide whether to put it in Fall of Pain.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Do you want to sum up?
I'm going to say right now, Dark Souls was a game changer, but Bloodborne is even better than Dark Souls. And I would argue it's the best game on PS4, bar none. It is. I think it's the best game on PlayStation 4. It perfects the Dark Souls formula from a kind of gameplay mechanic way. It's better than Dark Souls, and thematically and just visually, everything about it. I think it's just great.
And I love the horrible slow reveal of its cosmic horror, Lovecraftian.
I think without that, it's a very good game. But when you get to that point, when you start to ramp up the insight, when you get to Bergenworth and it transforms into this whole other game,
you almost feel like you yourself sat in your couch. You're becoming enlightened as you go through this process, and you feel a bit
because you come in. Your character is an outsider, and you're an outsider. You don't know what it's all about, and you just learn at the same time as your character does. And that's just what makes it so good. Great game. If it's not in the Hall of Pain, I'm quitting this podcast.
What? And is that will you just storm out now?
I'll storm out.
Will I suffer any violence beforehand?
I'll probably trash something on the way out.
Okay, all right. I thought you might go full, like, what would a Bloodborne character do? Chop my head off with a...
Christ knows.
Well, don't worry. We don't need to find out, because I am chuffed to bits to induct Bloodborne into the... I'll do it in Mikolash's voice.
Yeah,
that'd be good. That'd be fitting, wouldn't it?
I'm going to induct Bloodborne into the Hall of Pain.
I should have done the laugh.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine.
Maybe we could use... Maybe that's the laugh. Maybe we could switch roles next.
Well deserved as well. Well deserved. Great game.
We'll get Mikolash on as a guest next time, and he can do all the laughing. On which note, we'd best go to bed, basically.
We didn't even talk about Canehurst.
Oh, no! Right. Well, don't worry, because it hasn't recorded properly anyway. That was just a warm-up. Only joking! Hey. Yeah, Castle Canehurst.
Brilliant bit, yeah.
Do that bit.
Yeah, do that bit.
If you're playing through it, you haven't been to Canehurst, find out how to get there.
Yeah, we haven't spoiled. We didn't spoil it on purpose.
One bit we didn't spoil.
That's great. That's great.
For you. On which blood-splattered, blood-tinged note, there you go.
Very good.
It only remains to say goodbye, dear listeners, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Dark Natter. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Mikolash here. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please go and leave a 5-star review. And also make sure you contact those chumps, Jon and Liam, at darknatterpodcast@gmail.com, or follow them on Twitter at dark_natter, or on Instagram at darknatterpodcast. You can also watch them on YouTube if you search for Dark Natter, where they're playing through Bloodborne's Canehurst Castle level with disappointing results.
Thanks, McClash. Much appreciated.
Grant us eyes.
Yeah, got you. That's quite enough of that, thanks. Just one final point from me is I've got a load of books out, and I'd love it if you would buy a copy, or at least check out my website to see if it's your cup of tea. You can do that at www.jon-richter.com. That's JON-RICHTER, where you can find news of my upcoming releases, including something special coming on Halloween. See you next time.